how far I've come. I don't know if you can still hear that. In the first sentence itself, you know that there's a love triangle. We'll continue. I'm supposed to be working on my manuscript, but that's not been happening for some time. The weather has been so up and down. It's supposed to be spring here, but the temperature has been fluctuating so much that we've all been feeling a little under the weather. And even though I'm out of that, I am feeling a little demotivated about my manuscript because it's moving at such a snail's pace. And I thought to pull myself out of it, I'll just look back at my manuscript. I thought it would be nice to see how far I've come and how much I've grown as a writer. And even though the manuscript is not where I would want it to be, but I am making improvements, I am making progress, and I thought I'll share some of the things I find in there, and hopefully there'll be some takeaway for you, and you can see how what's working in your manuscript and what improvements you can make in there. I hope you don't mind the sound that's going on. If it gets too much, I'll move back inside. Some gardeners are doing some work around here. I've been making quite a few videos on writing craft, and I recently posted a video on the writing mistakes I made as a new writer and what are the things that I did or I'm doing to fix those mistakes as I'm working on my future projects. I also made a video on writing suspense and how there are some techniques that we can use to bring the suspense element out in our manuscripts, and I'll link all these videos for you in the description section of this video so that it's easy access for you if you're looking for some craft related tips. I have my notes opened on my laptop here. So the opening scene, the first few lines, the first paragraph, even the first chapter, however you want to look at, that's very important for us writers because that's where we hook our readers in. I'm looking at the first chapter and my notes are based on the first chapter from my earlier drafts to the current draft that I'm working on. My opening scene was taking place in Andheri in Mumbai in a high-rise apartment, but after a couple of drafts, now it's taking place on a beachside hotel in Juhu, Mumbai again. The story is taking place in Mumbai and surrounding cities and a few other places. So there itself, the location has changed from the earlier drafts to now, and there was a conscious decision to make that change. A critical scene in the first half of the book takes place at a particular place, and earlier when I had the scene written in a way that it was happening in an apartment building, that took very long for me to get the characters to the place where the critical scene would take place. So I had to speed things up a little and remove some scenes from my earlier draft. So now the opening scene itself is taking place where the critical scene is going to happen, and that was important because I wanted to hook my reader in and have them be in a place where they would be interested to continue reading further into the story. Now there are many ways to do this. I was attending a Readsy workshop. They have these free workshops on their YouTube channel, and I think the editor's name is Rebecca. She does this first line frenzy where you submit the first line of your book and she'll critique it depending on what genre you're writing in. And even if your first line is not selected for that workshop, it's really nice to listen to the feedback that other writers are getting on the first line that they have submitted. So if you're writing in the similar genre, then you can really benefit from that. So if you're interested, do attend Readsy's online workshop. You'll find the information on their YouTube channel, I'm sure. I think the noise is going to only increase now, so let us take this inside. I don't know if you can still hear that. I hope it's not too distracting. This is why I don't like to record videos on Mondays, because it's really noisy. Anyways, I did finish the audiobook that I was talking about in the last vlog, I think, or the video before that, Impact Winter. I finished it I think the next day. Overall, I liked the audiobook. The performance was good, the characters were interesting, the story was alright overall. It's not my preferred genre to read in, so I have that bias, but the story was engaging. There was a good setup and a good twist and everything, so I liked the story overall. What I didn't like was what I was talking about in the vlog, and that was, it was just so highly produced, and I didn't know at that time, but after I downloaded, maybe the algorithms picked it up, I was being served the Audible ad for that book, Impact Winter, on YouTube and on other places. So I realized that looks like there is a lot of this book has a big marketing budget basically for Audible to put out ads this way. There haven't been many books that I've seen advertised this way by Audible, so that was interesting. So that gives me the hint that they are planning something big with this book as far as the marketing and promotion aspects of it goes. What I didn't like was that even though the music was good and everything, I found it a little bit distracting. I took a little break, had my lunch, thinking that the noise would stop by then, but it came right outside my window. Alright, I hope you don't get too bothered by that sound. We'll continue. So I was talking about the audiobook. It made it difficult at times to listen to the dialogues, which I feel is a little problematic. Maybe they'll take care of it if they continue with this series. I'm guessing this is going to be a series because it ended at a cliffhanger, at a very good cliffhanger. So I'm hoping they would do a better job with that. I feel that was one critique I had with the music and the sound production part of it. But I appreciate the amount of effort that must have gone into creating this audiobook. And since I've been thinking about having an audiobook for my own books, audio version of my own books, it's natural that I'm curious about how the production side of it goes. And the way the credits were read out, I went on the website and I checked. There are a lot of people working to produce this book, which is incredible. And that's when I found out that the author is also the audiobook director, which makes me very happy because not all authors get to have an input in the way the audiobook is narrated. So it was nice to know that this author was doing that. I'm sure this must have been such a fulfilling part as a creator. So that made me a lot happy, and I didn't mind the other things so much. Overall, if you have a membership of Audible, see if you want to check out this book, because I think this is exclusive to Audible only. Anyways, let's finally get into the video. I have my notes pulled up this time on my tablet because the laptop needed charging. The first point that I have noted down here is what happens in the first scene should tell the readers where the characters are in their arc at that particular point. A lot of time, especially as new writers, we might think we need to tell the story from way back, but where you start your story should be important and should start where you give enough enough build up to the current point that the characters are in the story arc, but also not drag it out, because then the change that the character is going to go through is going to take forever for that portion of the story to come up. So that was the first point. So as the story progresses, as writers, we can show how the characters are developing. And if you start the story way back, then you spend that much extra time getting to this point, which is what makes a story good, right? You see the character a certain way, and then something happens and they change, and then some event changes them, something happens that changes them. So that's the mistake I was making early on in the earlier drafts, where I started the story way back in that apartment. But with this current draft, what I've done is I've raised the stakes from the get-go, and I'm introducing the plot points without wasting so much time and attention of the readers. That's what I'm aiming for. This will also depend on the type of story you're telling. There's another story that I've on and off worked on, and I haven't talked about it over here, but in that story I'm spending a lot of time showing the relationship between two characters, because that story is very different from a suspense novel that I'm working on right now. And the reason behind why I'm doing that is I want the readers to be invested in their relationship, and I want them to care about what happens to these characters. The next point that I have is some of the ways that you can write your first scene, your first line, your first chapter, and that is, it should be attention grabbing and prompt a question for the readers. Now that does not mean literally have a question. Of course you can have that, but it should pause the reader and have them question what's going to happen in the story, so that they pick up the book and continue reading. We have to pose it in such a way so that the reader gets invested and wants to know how things play out and figure out what's going on in the story. And as a writer, we have to be very good with how we do this, because we don't have a whole lot of time. Sometimes it's just a sentence, just a paragraph, just the first page. Now, how do you do that? How do you skillfully put this question in the minds of the readers so that they continue reading your book? Now, there are many ways we can learn to do this as writers. Workshops, have critique partners, and there are a whole bunch of things that you can do. But a very easy, quick, and in my opinion, a lot later, looks like this is just the wrong day to do this. Anyways, I'll try to do this quickly because I have to go pick up my kid from school. One of my favorite things to learn this technique is just by going through all the books, all my favorite books, reading their first line, their first paragraph, and just analyzing how my favorite authors, or just the books, my favorite books, how the author has done this, and how I can replicate this, how I can learn from their technique and apply in my own story. Back in winter of last year, I guess, when I was not able to write a lot, I did this exercise. I went through my favorite books and I looked up, I must have looked up at least 50 books, if not more. And I went through the first lines and first paragraphs and just observed what was happening. I have pulled up the Kindle app on my tablet, and I'm just going to read the first lines of some of my favorite novels. So this one is a contemporary women fiction, One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's being made into a movie, I believe, or a series or something like that. But listen to the first line here, okay? I'm finishing up dinner with my family and my fiancé when my husband calls. I feel this sentence is done so beautifully. In the first sentence itself, you know that there's a love triangle, and the question in my mind as a reader is, what is she doing with a fiancé if she already has a husband? And of course, if the family is involved, means people know about it. So why does she have a husband and a fiancé? So that's the question in my mind, even though there's no question written in the in the first line. There's no question in the first line, but that's the question I have in my mind, and I want to find out, why does she have a husband and a fiance? What is she doing with both of them? So that was a very skillfully done first line, in my opinion. The other one that I have here that is also being made into a movie is historic fiction, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I use this book as an example in a lot of ways. I'm a little partial to it also because I have very fond memories of meeting this author. I had this opportunity of attending an event where the author was speaking about this book, and it was a luncheon where you could interact with other readers who were a fan of the author or were just there to, I don't know, to be at this event. And there were this, if you don't know, this story, The Nightingale, is written, it's a historical fiction written in World War II as the backdrop. And at that event, there was a Holocaust survivor also attending that event. So it was a very, I found it really impactful, and it was just a wonderful event to be a part of. But let's read the first line over here. If I've learned anything in this long life of mine, it is this: in love we find out who we want to be, in war we find out who we are. So right away, you know, whoever is saying this line has survived the war. It also sets the tone that war makes you do things that you can't even imagine. And if you continue reading the first paragraph, it goes like this: today's young people want to know everything about everyone. They think talking about a problem will solve it. I come from a quieter generation. We understand the value of forgetting, the lure of reinvention. Again, wonderfully done. This next book is already made into a movie. It's a sci-fi book called The Martian by Andy Weir, and the first few lines read like this: I'm pretty much that's my considered opinion. 6 days into what should be the greatest moment of my life, and it's turned into a nightmare. So you immediately know that something has gone wrong and you want to find out what has happened. So I can go on and on with all my favorite books and their first line. So some of the things that you would want to analyze while you are doing this activity is why the author chose to open the story at that point, and see how they've opened it. Have they used a dialogue? Is it an action scene? Is it a flashback or a flash forward? Or is it happening in the dream? Whose point of view is it? Is it the protagonist's point of view or the antagonist's point of view? What is it that the author is trying to show? Is it a relationship, or is it starting with a red herring itself? And all these things will depend on the type of genre you're writing it. So another thing is, while you're doing this activity, pick up the genre that you're writing in along with some other genres, just to see what are the similarities in if you're writing in some genre versus the differences between different genres, how different genres start. So a lot you can do with this, and you don't even need to buy a bunch of books. If you don't have a lot of your favorite books at home, you can just go on Amazon and for most books, they let you see the first couple of pages, maybe even the first chapter. So you can just go through this free of cost. Just go on Amazon and look through your favorite books, and there's so much you can learn from there. Wow, this video was all over the place, and I hope I'm able to edit it into a more cohesive video for you. And if you have a question for me, pop them in the comments section. Last week and the week before that, I've been getting a lot of questions on self-publishing. What is the process? How do you go about it? What are the steps involved? And I have a lot of videos on self-publishing, how I do things. I'll pop up the playlist up here. Also check the description section. There are a lot of details in there, and I'll see you in the next one.